The feedback has been great. And, what was awesome about that Trail Career School in particular is you had two separate clubs from the same region, but come together. And so now it's not just a vision for, hey, this is my town. It's, hey, like, what can we do with our region? So that's really exciting. And we're starting to see more and more interest.
Welcome to Trail Effect. I am your host, Josh Blum. Trail Effect is a show that dives into the stories behind trails, the communities that embrace trails, and the people who rely on trails as a way of life. The goal of this show is to turn the stories you will hear from our guests into useful knowledge that can be applied to your community while providing some entertaining and inspirational content. Guests on Trail Effect include trail builders, board members, community leaders, volunteers, and regular people who really enjoy trails. For episode 187, we have Marty Caivino, the local community engagement manager for IMBA, and John Cox, the education manager for IMBA. We discussed many topics, including the IMBA Foundations, which is formerly known as IMBA Trail Labs, along with a lot of the other community engagement and educational programs that IMBA is continuing to host in 2025. There is also a hint of IMBA Epics returning in 2025. Cooley Creative is the title sponsor for this episode. They design and build custom websites, as well as help companies with branding, photography, and e-commerce. Cooley Creative was started in Wisconsin, but is now based out of Bend, Oregon. Jared from Cooley Creative is a friend of mine. We've traveled together on multiple mountain bike trips, and sometimes he sends it. For more information about Cooley Creative, head on over to www.dudejustsendit.com. Yes, that's right, www.dudejustsendit will get you to the Cooley Creative website, so check it out. Cattle Mountain Apparel, the brand that was built by travelers, hikers, trail runners, and mountain bikers, with the motto of venture far, laugh hard. While I definitely use Cattle Mountain apparel for mountain biking, Cattle Mountain is also my go-to choice for daily wear as it is super functional and comfortable. Cattle Mountain Apparel also offers a lifetime gear repair program with the goal of extending the life of their products while reducing waste in the process. If you ever damage any of your apparel, Cattle Mountain will repair it for free for life. By using the affiliate link found in the show notes or on the Trail Effect website, a small commission will come back to the Trail Effect podcast, which helps to cover the cost of expenses for keeping this show going. Now on to the Trail Effect with Marty and John. Here we are today on Trail Effect. I have Marty Caivino, who is a local community engagement manager for IMBA, and John Cox, who is the education manager at IMBA. And we're going to be talking about IMBA education for 2025, and both community engagement and education kind of go hand in hand, which is why we have both Marty and John on the show today. How's it going today, Marty and John?
Great.
Well,
Perfect.
Great. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you too. As most people know, I'm a huge supporter of IMBA. I think IMBA obviously is the longest standing trail advocacy organization in both the United States and in the world, starting back in, I believe, 1988. And so I think what IMBA has done over the years has been extremely vital to our trail community. So I appreciate having you two on today. Let's start with Marty. Let's get your backstory. I know it's probably pretty storied as far as like your role at IMBA. I think you've been there for quite a while now. And so let's kind of learn how you got into working at IMBA and how that parlays into what you're doing now.
yeah, for sure. So this is my second round at IMBA. Actually, I had an early career in photojournalism and then was hired at IMBA to run the Subaru IMBA Trail Care crew, which was such a fun job. I mean, I didn't get to go to all their cool locations, but I got to at least, work with them and manage their whole process and report back to Subaru. And then when Subaru pulled out some years later, it created some financial challenges for the program. So I departed from IMBA and worked in the industry, went to DT Swiss and some manufacturers, and then was rehired at IMBA in 2021 to do community engagement. So what I do day to day is primarily help people that are trying to work on trail development. So they'll call IMBA, ask for help, seeking resources and information. And, I do my best to guide them and help them through their barriers.
IMBA Trail Care School, back in the early days. I don't want to date this too much, but were you there as early as the Mike Ryder Jan Trail Care crew, or are we talking sooner than that or more recent than that?
That was definitely before my time. That was like the first trail care crew, and then Joey Klein and and his partner was after that. So that was definitely early days. I came in, I believe, with Chris and Leslie Kmeyer, for folks who know them.
Yeah, there's IMBA Trail Care Crew is so awesome. I mean, I was able to attend, I think, at least 3 IMBA Trail Care schools back in would have been the early to mid 2000s, and it was such an awesome thing for our community when IMBA came to town. Everybody was super excited. John, let's get into your backstory.
Yeah, we kind of use the trail care crew as a bridge here. So my first exposure to IMBA was back, I'd say 2013, 2014. So kind of as the trail care crews were winding down or getting ready to wind down, I was introduced to the trail care crew in Dayton, Ohio at the time. And I was in school studying outdoor recreation and education, riding bikes. And so it kind of exposed me to a whole different part of the industry. And then later on, one of the regional directors, Andy Williamson, was, down in Southeast Ohio where I went to school. And we were talking about the Bailey's trail system. And I was representing an environmental education agency at the time as an intern. And, so I was starting to get the wheels turning of, I could take this passion of, riding bikes and then maybe, make this a career down the line. But after I graduated, I went to do, full-time expedition work, 30 days out in the woods with teenagers and different clients. And that was great, but not sustainable in the long run. And so, and I didn't get to ride my bike as much, right? And so I was like, how do I make this happen? And started to work in the industry. I worked for an e-bike company for a little bit. And then I went on to run a outdoor program for a university. And so going back to those outdoor recreation education roots and, developing curriculum, teaching, all of that, provided me with some skill sets that I could bring into my current role as education manager. And so when this position came up, I was like, great, we can marry the bikes and the trails and this education component and, start diving into curriculum development. How do we, bring about professional education in something that has, historically been a little bit more organic. So what I do now is create programs and resources alongside our subject matter experts to help folks navigate the trail development process.
Part of that trail development process is the Trail Labs workshops and programs, which I get a little bit confused now with, because I remember Trail Labs as being just Trail Labs. When it first started out, I want to say it would have been in spring of 2018, if I'm not mistaken,
right.
Back in the Bentonville era. But let's talk about the foundations aspect of that, which is the original Trail Labs, and kind of your interaction with that, who it's for and where it's going and where it's been, because it's been in a bunch of places around the country as well. It's not just been in Bentonville, and it's going to the upper Midwest.
Yeah. Trail Labs is the naming convention gets a little confusing because it was, just known as Trail Labs, and there was debate. Is there an S? Is there not an S? Is it Trail Labs? And it started as Trail Labs, right? Like you're out in the field learning about how these beautiful trail systems came to life. And as the program evolved, we realized, hey, Trail Labs could be the moniker for the entire education program. But this course is, the foundation. This is where we look at the trail development process from a bird's eye view, all the way from, the vision through construction, all the way to stewardship. So that full life cycle is, the foundations course. But yeah, you're spot on. It started back in 2018 in Bentonville. So, we're going into the 7th year. And Bentonville, most people have heard of it by this point, is, the Disney World of mountain biking, right? Sometimes I joke with folks that it's kind of like stepping into a vision board. So, what do you want to happen in your community? There's probably an example of it here. And that comes with its own challenges. Not everyone can be Bentonville. There can only be one Bentonville. And so we started to look beyond Bentonville, as great of a location as it was, to find some examples across the country that are attainable for folks. And, our first branch out of that was Cedar City, Utah. And if you haven't been to Cedar City, Utah, you definitely should go. They have an awesome little community there. It's a small town. You instantly feel like you're at home. And then they have these amazing trails right out their door. And anyone in town can ride from their house and go up to some epic views, have some crazy downhills, or enjoy, the green and the blue and ride with new riders. And so that place is a great example of what, a community trail system is. And then that brings us to Minnesota in our next couple of years.
Yeah, let's back up a little bit before we get ahead of ourselves in Minnesota. Marty, is there anything you would like to add on the foundations aspect of things?
It's a great way for folks to get sort of into our pipeline, so to speak. It's a way for them to really connect with IMBA and learn all the things we can do. We obviously can't cover everything under the sun in that one course. So it's a great way for them to meet us, know who to talk to, and figure out how to keep receiving help from IMBA as they move forward in their projects and goals.
If I could interject and talk a little bit about, who this program's for and a little bit how that's changed. Back in, 2018, the primary audience was the mountain bikers, right? As a rider, I want more trails. It's easy, right? But we've seen that change over the years. And now, the folks that are joining us aren't the mountain bikers just wanting trails for themselves. There's actually very little of that. We'll have a couple folks from local organizations there, but most of the people attending are the decision makers, city planners, tourism boards, viewing trails as an amenity for their communities. And so they're not just in it for themselves. And that's really exciting to see these, professional decision makers wanting to learn how to develop trails for their communities.
I just got something that popped into my brain, and this is going to be a good one for Marty. How has the evolution of trails and how trails interact with communities shifted in your mind? And that is, at one point, well, we are still asking for access in some arenas, but at one point we were like really asking for access to just belong. And now we have elected officials and, leaders within communities coming to resources like IMBA saying, how can we do this? Because we know this is a value to our community.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like some years ago, we had to do a lot of education of helping people to see the broader community benefits of trails. It's not just the guys in tights trying to find somewhere to ride like it was back in the 90s. Now it's like trails are good for everybody, even if you don't use them, right? They're having an economic impact on your community. They're having a positive impact on public health and all of those things. And people are more and more aware of that now. So the trend has definitely moved toward trails as being a broad community benefit and catalyst for change.
Yeah, for sure. John, Cedar City, Utah versus Bentonville. And I don't mean that as like what's better than the other, because we obviously, it's not a competitive thing. But when you're in a community like Bentonville, it's more that like Midwestern style community, right? Whereas you get out into the mountains, it's a whole different landscape. You have different players, different landowners. How is it to be able to provide that contrast of just the type of stuff you have to look at when you're in a Cedar City type of landscape versus more of an urban type of landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. The principles of the trail development process, remain the same. You're still coming up with a vision, plan, building those relationships, which are the driving force of the development process. But the folks that you are interacting with are very different. In the Midwest and the East, we have, more of a patchwork, right, of different land managers, be it city, county, state, national forest, versus, a place like Cedar City. It's massive swaths of federal land, primarily the BLM. And so how you approach those is going to be very different. In some ways, it's a little bit more straightforward because there's one land manager that you're interacting with, and you're not, where are the lines? Where's this trail crossing over from county to state? That can get pretty complicated, and especially a place like Bentonville. And that's one of the reasons it makes the story so compelling. Is it's multiple cities, it's state land, it's all these different patchworks coming together to create ultimately what Bentonville is. But yeah, Cedar City, it's our goal to have foundations programs in different parts of the country so people can go somewhere that represents their situation and learn from like examples. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do through the Foundations program, is not tell IMBA's story, but tell that community's story so others can learn from their example. And so they can go back and make that happen in their own communities.
So we alluded to this earlier, but moving forward, you're going to Minnesota in 2025, and we're currently in early 2025. And the two communities you're going to, I'm fairly well aware of. Well, Winona specifically, I'm really aware of, but also Duluth. Those two communities, while they're both in Minnesota, are not the same type of community in the least bit. Both communities have had mountain biking probably since mountain bikes became a thing back in the 80s. But Winona is really starting to gear up. And so they're kind of in the early stages of becoming a really solid trail community, even though they've had trails since the 80s. Whereas Duluth has the Duluth Traverse and a whole bunch of pocket trail systems, and they're already robust. Let's talk about Winona first and how that might be received and who might be attending that.
Yeah, you're spot on. They are different. And, going back to what I just said is, we want to have these different examples. And yeah, Winona's coming up in the spring, and it's a small town, right? It's a small town with a big vision is how I would summarize it. And they're putting they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're creating these, awesome little pocket parks. And, they have 3 parks that they're trying to connect via trail right now. Again, having that, connectedness through the community, that access to outdoor recreation, and the community's bought in. You have an amazing local organization with WHAM, and then you have the mayor that's bought in to, see this vision through. And I mean, what more could you ask for to have, an elected official championing outdoor recreation and trail access in your town? It's an amazing example. And, the hope is that we have all those folks in the room. And so, when a mayor from some other town comes and they see the mayor of Winona saying, hey, this is having an impact, we're going to continue to invest in that. That sparks a whole new, wave of momentum in, that community that's attending. So I imagine Winona is going to attract, the smaller towns, someone that sees, it's almost like looking in a mirror, right?
Is this where we dropped that the mayor, and I only know this because I know the mayor at one time was the a sales rep for Niner.
You might be a little biased.
And happened to bring Single Speed USA to Winona back in 2013, which was a whole different type of characters.
It's true. Single speeders, man.
That was an interesting event. As an attendee, it was a lot of fun. And, Winona, for those that aren't aware, you might be thinking Minnesota's flat. Winona's in a part of Minnesota that's known as the Driftless area, and it is anything but flat. So you're going to get some good topography, some really good views of the Mississippi River Valley, in a small/mid-sized community. I want to say it's, and I'm only guessing here, but it's probably 15 to 25,000 people maybe.
Yeah, it might be slightly bigger if you factor in the university, but it's pretty small.
Yeah, that's right. Winona actually has, just to kind of paint the whole picture here, Winona also has 2 universities. They have St. Mary's, which is a private university, and they have Winona State, which is a public university. And so they've got a pretty broad cross-section of people in their community. Marty, let's bring you back into this.
Nice. Well, I have not had the pleasure of being to either of these places yet, so I'm really looking forward to the Foundations events this year. But I do hear that Duluth, it's obviously one of our IMBA ride centers. So they obviously have plenty going on, not only for residents, but for people visiting. And I think it'll be an exceptional event.
Yeah, we could probably go back to mayors when you bring up Duluth, because I will say the former Duluth, or it might be 2 mayors ago, but the former Duluth mayor was not a mountain biker, but saw the values and trails. And it was at a time where the city of Duluth was really down on its luck. And they're really trying to revitalize that community and give people a reason to relocate back there. Do either of you two want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I'll address it briefly. Again, looking for those examples of, communities that are looking to implement outdoor recreation as a tool for revitalization is a story we're hearing more and more, right? X industry left, and now the community's down on its luck, or, a little bit depressed. what can we do to both increase the livability and the joy of the people that live here and retain talent? And how can we draw some folks in for tourism, right? Those are kind of the two motivators, right? The people that are there and getting people to come visit. And Duluth is a great example of that. Old industry town, not really knowing, what to do with itself, and re-envisioning what they can do throughout the recreation. And, there's other great examples of this, be it Knoxville, Tennessee, Chattanooga, Tennessee, West Virginia as an entire state. They're looking to say, hey, like, we had this industry that's not going to last, but outdoor recreation and people wanting to be here, that will last.
Yeah, and the community of Duluth does have a broad outdoor recreation base. They've got mountain biking, obviously, that's why we're here talking today, but they also have an alpine ski area. They've got a rather robust cross-country ski network. They've got ice climbing. They've got a pretty big lake attached to it, Lake Superior, so and obviously other waterways. So there's just a lot going on in Duluth.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Josh, is, yes, while we, represent mountain bikers and even more broadly trail users as a whole, whenever we go in and, think about planning a system, we're not just thinking about the mountain bikers. We're thinking about every trail user that's going to be in this trail system. So everyone has a great experience. But zooming out, we're also trying to find those stakeholders in the community, the ice climbers, the paddlers, to create a bigger vision. Trails are just one part of that ecosystem, as you mentioned.
Let's move on to trail care schools, because it's like, I don't know if this is trail care schools 2.0, but it's a new thing, but something that really kind of, as we talked about earlier, put IMBA on the map back in the early days. So let's talk about how kind of the backstory of this program and how it got revived and where it is today. And I'll let either of you take this one, because I'm not sure who's the champion behind it.
I'll take the first stab at it, because it is a big part of my current role, but it is building upon, the legacy that Marty was telling earlier as the trail care crew. And, that went away for a little bit. And obviously, education was still happening, but it was kind of on the corner of people's desks. And, we realized, hey, we need to have a presence in communities. We need to have this touch point, especially now. There's been a lot of trail development that's happened. Like, we always want more, of course, but a lot of trail development has happened over the years. But as you know, those trails don't just stay that way forever, right? They need to be maintained, and people need to learn how to be good stewards of those trails. And, generations come, younger people get involved in the sport and are mountain biking, but there was a knowledge gap in a lot of places that didn't receive, the trail care crew. There was this, 10-year absence almost for some places. And we wanted to provide an opportunity for that educational pathway. And, who better to get involved than Joey Klein, who's been there forever, and Chris Orr as well. Both those guys are delivering all of our trail care schools and, come with decades of experience from the planning, design, construction, stewardship of trails. And so it's been really, really great to have that program alive, and interest is booming, which is great. We're booked out for the next 7 months almost for trail care schools. And so there's definitely a hunger for it. And, we look to expand that to continue to support the local stewards.
Let's go with you, Marty, and talk about the trail care school on your end. I mean, the original version of the trail care school was local community engagement. Like, that was how IMBA spread the word of IMBA and mountain biking. How awesome is it to see that it's back?
Oh, it's fantastic. That was such a missing piece of what was happening out on the landscape. And it's so great now because Joey and Chris have so much experience in virtually every aspect of stewardship, community engagement, and trail development that no matter where they go, it's so much more than just that, working on the trails and that sort of technical knowledge. They bring so much of helping local organizations learn how to move forward and kind of up their game, how to improve their relationships with land managers, even how to help train land management staff as part of these events. So their education is just so all encompassing when they arrive. It's just a huge influx of inspiration and, capacity building for these organizations. It's really more than what it sounds like when you read the description of the course.
Yeah, Spearfish, South Dakota, and more broadly, the Black Hills. I've got some friends that reside in that region and happen to attend the IMBA Trail Care School there. That was one that you guys also made a video on. How is that one received on your end?
Yeah, it's the feedback has been great, and what was awesome about that trail career school in particular is you had two separate clubs from the same region but come together. And so now it's not just a vision for, hey, this is my town. It's, hey, like, what can we do with our region? So that's really exciting. And we're starting to see more and more interest from that. I actually have an inquiry in right now for the entire state of North Dakota. And so maybe we'll take a foundations to the Dakotas soon enough. But I think those joint programs are really cool to see. So, it's not just Spearfish now. It's, what can we do with South Dakota? Because it's wild up there. If you haven't been up there, it's wild up there. And there's a lot of really, really cool opportunities.
Especially the west side of South Dakota, when you get into the Black Hills, it's legit mountains. And I've had a couple of residents on the podcast, so people that listen regularly are going to know what the Black Hills has to offer. But it's legit.
Well, I was going to say, plus you can go see the Devil's Tower in Wyoming on your way. It's very cool.
Yeah, you're right on the border of Wyoming, and I believe Black Hills National Forest actually does extend into Wyoming. So it's an awesome place. Let's roll into the Trail Accelerator workshop. This is a new one for me, although I am familiar with the Trail Accelerator program. Are those two tied at all, or are they independent of each other?
Again, the vocab could get confusing, so there's probably some work to be done there. But they are separate. They're separate programs. They sure can interact with one another. But the Trail Accelerator workshop is really designed to meet communities where they're at. And so the ideal folks to book this workshop are those who have maybe gone through the Foundations program and they have a vision that they're actively trying to implement or plan, but they've hit a roadblock and they need some, outside expertise to come in and help you maybe facilitate conversation amongst different stakeholders, or come up with a game plan and alternate solutions to navigate that roadblock. So it's definitely more of a custom program. It's not an off the shelf, here's the curriculum and the learning objectives you're going to get. It's hey, let's do some creative problem solving. Where are you stuck? What examples can we draw on as national experts? We have experience all across the country and in some cases the world, and bring that perspective in to help folks navigate their unique roadblocks.
Marty, is there anything you'd like to add for that one?
Not too much. I haven't had the pleasure of attending one yet to kind of see what's happening, but I kind of view it as a much needed expansion of the work that I do that's just, by phone call or email with folks. That program's really going to help people dive into what's going on in their specific goals and needs.
Yeah, I could imagine you probably get contacted regularly with a lot of the issues that would, be solved by a program like that. How about this? This is a good one for me. And I don't know, when I read what I'm about to read next, I think more maintenance, but I know it's a lot more holistic than that. And that is the Trail Management School. Let's talk about that program.
The Trail Management School is, a partner to the Trail Care School. And so it's really trying to accomplish the same thing, stewardship of the land, but it's for two different audiences. So the Trail Care School is primarily for the local organization and the volunteers. And then the Trail Management School is for those land managers. And, it's not to say, hey, we're coming in to train folks how to do their jobs, but sometimes people do find themselves in a position where they're all of a sudden responsible for trails, and that's not necessarily what they signed up for, and they want to do a good job. And that's where we can be a great partner to that land manager and help them, understand the, modern maintenance methodologies, while also discussing some of the, more managerial aspects such as volunteer management. How can you engage your local org to leverage that? And so while the topics are similar, it's just through a different lens of the land manager, and how can we equip the land manager to do the best job that they can.
Yeah, I could imagine that would be pretty critical, especially in like local parks departments, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's local parks. We also do a lot of these with the U.S. Forest Service. And so specifically in Region 5, and so that's California, we do tons of trail management schools and trail care schools through an agreement we have with them. And it's been incredibly impactful and is something we definitely hope to expand in the future.
Geographically speaking, just because I'm curious of where this is, what part of California is Region 5?
Region 5 covers all of California.
Oh, it's Region 5 for the U.S. Forest Service, which is the state of California. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
And as you can imagine, there's lots of work to be done there. There's lots of, tons and tons of trails, tons of U.S. Forest Service land. And then, as we see right now, lots of rework of trails that once were and now are no longer. So,
one, it's a hugely diverse state in terms of the ecosystem, right? You have Southern California and Northern California are two completely different. While they're the same state, they're completely different landscapes, right?
Absolutely. And it seems like the climate changes within a day as well. It could be snowing or on fire. It's a huge undertaking. And, Chris Orr heads up a lot of that work. His home base is California, and yeah, he's constantly engaging with the Forest Service, and it's a great partnership. But yeah, back to the trail management schools, it's, how do we elevate our land managers? Our outdoor recreation infrastructure is as good as it can be.
For sure. And people have great trail experiences, right?
That's what it comes back to.
Let's go into the trail assessment side of things. This is, I think, well, at least to me, it's newer. I don't know if it's newer within IMBA, but it's newer to me. And currently, from what I've found, there's IMBA's trail-friendly community self-assessment. Let's talk about what this means, or maybe we could back up and talk about the importance of this for IMBA and for potential people that are going to use this trail assessment tool.
Absolutely. So just to back up a step, this is again where more terminology gets confusing. So trail assessment could be viewed through a couple of lenses. One would be actual on the ground assessments of like, what trails do you have? What do you want to add? Should things be rerouted? We do that kind of assessment work for sure through IMBA Trail Solutions. And then the trail friendly self-assessment is actually kind of an education and comprehensive sort of tool to let you view your community through a trail lens. And we developed this to kind of help people take stock of what they have and, figure out where their gaps are. So they go through this assessment. The whole thing is automated, so they get an automated score at the end. Right away, they can see their score in each category. There's 8 different categories. And, it spans the usual things from stewardship, access, vision, all the way through to what trails do you have on the ground? Do you have paid staff either in your organization or in your land management agencies that's specifically focused on trails? All these kind of questions to try to get a comprehensive view of your community. And then at the end, you get an email with a bunch of recommendations. So if you scored poorly in a certain area, it'll tell you some things to embark on to improve that area. And so it's a way for people to engage with it and see what they can learn and see some of their gaps, just kind of in one fell swoop. It's sort of a quick and easy way to see where you stand. And then obviously they can reach out to me at any time for help with any of those pieces, if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure it does. Knowing where you are is paramount to knowing where you're going to go, because you need to know exactly where you're at first to know, what kind of targets you need to be aiming at, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this a newer program for IMBA, and kind of what spurred it, the self-assessment part that is?
Yeah, so we just launched this just a couple of months ago, probably 6 weeks ago. And, our goal with it was to be, it's kind of taken on some different nuances. Originally, we wanted to create something that people who could not attain Ride Center status had something else to strive for, so they could be a trail-friendly community. But we realized the first step in that is to take a lot of these emerging communities, maybe not full-on trail deserts, but just communities that are learning what trails can bring to them, to give them a starting place and give them that education and let them engage with this assessment tool for a while before we eventually launch a designation of the trail-friendly community, which we're hoping to do later this spring.
Is it too early to talk about that designation, or can you kind of give some high-level details of what that what that may mean for communities?
Yeah, I don't have too much to say since we still have a lot to work out on the actual designation, but it'll be based on that assessment. People, once we launch the designation, they'll be able to submit documentation that supports what they entered into the assessment. We'll do essentially a desktop analysis and, maybe contact some of the folks that we know in a given community to verify. And then if they meet the criteria to a certain level, we'll give them kind of that rubber stamp of approval of you're a trail friendly community. And then these places can use that for their own marketing and kind of development from that externally facing point of view.
When I was looking this up on the website prior to meeting up with you guys, I noticed that it was developed with West Virginia University, and I know John brought up West Virginia. Maybe you could talk about that partnership a little bit, because I think West Virginia is the next frontier in terms of like incredible trail development.
Oh my gosh, yeah, they have such beautiful terrain and so much to work with and so much need. So it's great to work with WVU because they have that outdoor program, the Brad and Alice, I'm going to forget the name of it. It's
Brad
such a long
Smith.
Yeah, economic development, initiative that they have. So Andy Williamson, who used to work at IMBA, heads that up. And so he was, very interested in seeing a program like this develop. I think he probably wanted to do this when he was at IMBA. So now that we have it, they've been very helpful in the technology that's behind the assessment itself so that it will, provide that automated result. And, they helped us kind of draft some of the questions and criteria that's behind it and make it self-sustaining. So, and then they, of course, would like to deploy it throughout West Virginia with all the community development work they're doing in these many towns that would like to add to their recreation base and put that out to the world.
Are there any sort of like, I'm going to preface this might be too premature to ask this question, but is there any sort of like minimum metrics or standards that you guys are looking at when it comes to this trail friendly community?
Yeah. It's tough because we know that every community is a little bit different. Certain places are going to find some things easy and others won't. But we do think there should be like at least a minimum amount of trail on the ground. So, and again, what's a minimum for a given community? It may depend on how many people live there and how large the ridership is. So even that was really hard to define. And we've left that still a bit loose because we're not going to try to tell people how much mileage they need. But there should be enough there to offer some variety, and people don't have to ride the exact same trail system every time they ride, things like that. It'd be really nice if people have a little bike park or skills area or something for, kids and new riders to develop their skills on. So it's a lot of things like that we're looking for. And then, there obviously needs to be some level of stewardship happening. It's really hard to have trails with no one to maintain them, or at least the land managers have to be maintaining them. And so each category in the assessment kind of has its own like bare minimum of what we'd like to see. And if you take the assessment, you can kind of clearly see where those things break down.
Who should take the assessment within a community? Is it open for like any community member? Should it be a trail org? Should it be maybe a Parks and Rec director or somebody that works within maybe Parks and Recreation staff? Like who's it? Or is it, literally could, Jim from wherever just hop online and take it?
Yeah, anybody. We tried to create it with the lens of almost anybody could take it to see where they stand. Like in a dream world, we'd love it if like a local mountain bike club got together with their various land managers and, ran through it together in some sort of stakeholder meeting, because it would really help foster conversation, foster common goals. Like that would be amazing. But we know most people are just going to sit down at their computer and go through it to see where they stand and what's going on with them. But it could be anybody.
Yeah, that would be a really good exercise to do within a community, to have like your Parks and Rec director and your organization members to kind of, because I know everybody's going to look at this through a little bit different lens, right? Because everybody has different goals on what they, and different experiences that they might pull from somewhere else in life, right?
Absolutely. Like I've already seen like two different people from a given community fill it out and the answers are not identical. So there's even a certain amount of, slight variation in how people view the answers.
How would you address that? But I'm curious to know. One person says, I got 15 miles of trail. And then another person says, we got 5.
That part, we didn't see much variation in. The trails stuff was pretty standardized, but more like one respondent thinks the stewardship group is more effective than the other, or thinks their land managers are more engaged than the other. So some of that just can't be helped. It's sort of the human way of how you view things.
Yeah. That is very true. Do you want to talk about the status of ride centers, where they are and where they're going? I know, through this podcast and in my professional world, ride centers come up a lot as a topic of conversation. And it seems like, I don't want to age myself, but it seems like people from my generation, which is, I'm going to say mid 40s and beyond, are well aware of what ride centers, what they were, why they started, this purpose they serve, and just all of that. Like I remember back in 2008, my community was on the brink of becoming one of the first 3 IMBA ride centers. So I was very aware of it early on, back when Scott Lindenberger was spearheading the program, we'll say. So we're talking, dinosaur status, right? But I talk to communities now and they may be a bronze and they want to get to a silver, or they may be a silver and they want to get to like that Park City destination level thing. What is the status of the ride centers, and maybe a backstory of what they mean? Because I talk to people that are in their 20s and they're like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah. Well, I was not at IMBA when ride centers were created, although certainly when I was running Trail Care Crew, they were there. And, the goal was to kind of help kind of large destination scale communities figure out what they really need to create that diverse experience where people would want to travel there, stay for several days, have good variety to ride, find things to check out and maybe even to do when they're not riding, sort of that complete visitor experience. And so, obviously our Trail Solutions staff would go assess these places and experience it for themselves, and then give it not only a quantitative score of, yeah, there's this amount of trail so you could ride for multiple days, but also a qualitative scale of, it was fun. It wasn't the same mile of trail experienced over and over, so there was good variety and a quality experience there. And then the communities themselves could use the designation for their own marketing. Now, granted, times have changed. The internet will tell you all the great places to go ride, and you can kind of find anything and everything that you need. But we felt that the Ride Center program still had value, again, as kind of that educational piece. Sometimes you have destinations that just don't know what they don't know. They may understand tourism, but they don't know how to apply that to trails necessarily. Like, oh, okay, we need a gravity experience and we need a family-friendly experience, and we need some really difficult trails. We need some really easy trails. And so, we hope that the experience helps them identify what's missing from their community that would really help draw people there and make it a more just robust experience. If you came for 4 or 5 days, is there enough to keep you interested? Or in the case of bronze, it's probably more like 3 days to not repeat yourself. But nonetheless, the goal was just to help them get a picture of what's missing in their destination.
Yeah, a good example of a bronze that I recently went to would be Anniston, Alabama. In Anniston, they have multiple trail systems. I was there for 2 days, and I really only rode one trail system, and I didn't even ride all of that trail system. And I had 2 pretty decent riding days in those 2 days. So it's a pretty, and they're bronze, right? But I know from talking to people that live in that community, they're doing what they can to seek silver because they really want that silver status, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I hope I'm not misspeaking here, but I believe they're embarking on 15 more miles, which will be great.
Yeah, you're not misspeaking. Those miles are currently being constructed as we record this. Or at least the start of those miles are. They're not all being. They don't just drop in 15-mile segments, but they are under construction. So, which is an awesome thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So one thing I like to ask all of my listeners, or almost all my listeners, is a question, which is what, and I'm going to have Marty answer first and then John, so we don't talk on top of each other. And this is a purely selfish question. So you can take your IMBA hat off and just put your personal hat on. What is your idea, or what are the amenities that you believe are good for a trail community? Some people answer this. Examples would be some people like, oh, it needs a microbrewery, or my example always is wood-fired pizza. But some people also answer of like, it's just got a really robust community in itself and people are connected and they really like to be there. And then obviously there's some trails. Marty, why don't you answer that first? Like, what in your opinion makes a great trail community?
I think like the proximity of trails, well, there's so many different elements that go into it based on some of the things you just said, but I think the proximity of trails can be so valuable. Like I'm currently living in a place where I can't just pedal to the trails, and that's such a bummer. For me to do a lunch ride, I have to factor in all this drive time. And I just think having trails nearby that you can pedal to is huge. And not every community can do that. Obviously, I'm aware since I live in one. But yeah, if there's trails nearby, that's huge. And then if you can pedal to the brewery or the coffee shop and, see other riders and feel like you're welcomed as a rider, not getting dirty looks from the coffee shop owner when you park your bike out on the patio and sit there with a coffee, all of those things kind of just make you feel like you belong and the trails are easily accessible. And that always feels good.
Yeah. Less car use, more bike use, right?
Yeah.
Let's get your thoughts on this, John. I'm thinking you're living in a trail community.
Yeah, I live in Western North Carolina, which is definitely known for its trails and, Brevard specifically being, a trail mecca. But yeah, I have about 400 miles within an hour radius of my house. So I'm very, very fortunate. And so, if I were to answer your question, Josh, I would say it's having a lot of mileage and a variety. For someone who rides a lot in high volume, it's nice to not have to ride the same thing over and over again. And I've lived in smaller communities that had amazing trails, but there was like 12 miles of it. And it gets boring a little bit, when that's what you're riding every day. And so I think having large mileage for me personally is awesome, and having a variety of experiences. I can go, take a little bit easier and ride in DuPont State Forest, and, it's a little bit more XC, or I can go, do some downhill either at a park or out in Pisgah, rocks, roots, and repeat. Right. So those are big. And then I think stepping away from the trails, having great coffee would be the other important one. You got to have the go-go juice to keep going.
Yeah, those are good answers. I like how everybody answers these slightly differently. And I've been asked if I've created a spreadsheet for answers, and I haven't, but I think it's all good stuff, right?
Wood-fired pizza is a good option too.
Wood-fired, yeah. It's interesting because whenever I go to a community that has good trails and good wood-fired pizza, that is the sweet spot.
Yeah. Luckily, I have a bakery about 2 miles from the house that does wood-fired. And so it's clutch, especially if you come back from a long ride and hit that on the way back.
Yeah. Yeah. See, now you're speaking my language. Before we wrap this thing up, and I'm going to go to Marty first, is there anything that we didn't hit on in your world in terms of IMBA that you want to discuss before we close this one out?
I just wanted to add that as part of this whole designations kind of relaunch that we're doing, we are going to bring the epics back too. And we're going to bring a really fun element to it where we're not going to select the epics. You riders out there are going to select the epics. So we'll take nominations and then we're going to put it up for public vote. And don't totally know, how we're going to structure this yet, but I really look forward to it. I think it'll be a fun way to get riders involved in helping us select the best big backcountry trails that have been built since the Epics program has been quiet, right? So there's been some downtime. A lot's been built and connected. I'm excited to see what gets nominated.
Without the risk of sounding like a dinosaur, let's let people know what the Epics program is. Could you talk about that one briefly? Because that is a good program too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I should have started with that. So the Epics were designed to highlight all kind of the big, long, difficult backcountry rides that mountain biking was kind of born from. And as much as we at IMBA love more trails close to home, because that's what you ride every day, we did not want to lose sight of those experiences that everybody cherishes as that big weekend with your buddies. And so the Epics are kind of defined by a ride that's at least 18 miles long, 80% or more single track, and has a backcountry feel. You don't want to have 18 miles that's just right up against the city. And then they should be beautiful to behold. Obviously, it's going to depend on your landscape, but it'd be really nice if it's in that kind of iconic landscape, where you shoot, you spend half the ride stopping to shoot photos and that sort of thing. And IMBA Europe is really interested in seeing this program come back as well, because they've got plenty of epics. They have some interesting aspects to their epics. We were chatting about it, and they're like, well, can there be an uplift in the middle of the epic? I was like, well, that's only going to happen in Europe, but that sounds awesome. So yeah, that was what the epic was meant to do, was to celebrate those experiences.
It could happen in Duluth, maybe.
Oh yeah, I like the way you think.
To bring that full circle, because there is Spirit Mountain, which has a gravity bike park at it in the middle of the Duluth Traverse.
Nice.
But
There we go.
that would be more like, and this is going to divide the epics into another whole segment, but that would be more of an urban epic.
True. True. That would be a little tougher to meet the criteria if the city's right there.
But Duluth is a really, I mean, you kind of feel like you're in the backcountry in sections of that place because while the city is huge, it's not fully developed in terms of within its city limits. So it's pretty awesome. I think the people that attend that, to bring that full circle, I think the people that attend that Foundations in Duluth are going to be, well, both Duluth and Winona, they're going to be surprised with what they find. John, is there anything on the educational front that we didn't discuss that you'd like to get into before we close this one out?
I think we covered just about everything. I think the way I would summarize the education programs for IMBA is we want to be your partner and help you achieve your vision and your goals for your trail community and help you along the way and create programs and resources. And so don't be a stranger. Reach out to Marty, myself, or our instructors, Chris and Joey, to see how we can partner, see what we can do to help your visions for a trail community come to life.
Well, I really appreciate you two taking some time out of your day to hop on the Trail Effect podcast and spread some knowledge about IMBA. As I said at the opening of this, IMBA does play a very critical role within our mountain bike ecosystem and our mountain biking community. And I appreciate everything that IMBA has done over the years, and in the future looks pretty incredible for you guys. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
Yeah, we appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please take the time to share these shows with others. Sharing these shows will help create awareness of both the guests who have taken the time to be on the show and the podcast series itself. Also, if you're new to the Trail Effect podcast, check out our ever-expanding library of episodes. If you listen to the Trail Effect podcast on Apple or Spotify, please don't forget to leave a rating and review, as this is one of the best ways to show our support for the Trail Effect podcast. Also, don't forget to check out Cooley Creative at www.dojustsendit.com. For additional ways to help support the Trail Effect podcast, check out the affiliate links tab at the Trail Effect website, where you'll find links to Kettle Mountain Apparel, Worldwide Cyclery, and Trail One components. By using the affiliate links found at www.traileffectpodcast.com, a small commission will come back to the podcast, which will help keep this thing going. This podcast has been edited and produced by Evolution Trail Services. Thank you again for listening.